What was it specifically for you about the Eastern healing practices, philosophies, ideas that you weren't getting from the more Western side of things?
It was so refreshing to be in a space where the body was looked at as a whole and not just parts.
And so what would you say to people that are sort of in that boat where they feel like almost stuck?
This is a huge one, and I love talking about this. No matter what is happening in your life, you are going to have a plan that works for you.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People, episode 64. My guest today is Dr. Isabel Meijering. She is the owner of Admiring You Wellness, a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and a life coach. In today's episode, expect to get an overview of all of the work Isabel does, how she breaks down wellness into 6 pillars, and actionable steps that you can take for each one of these pillars to improve your life. If you guys are listening on YouTube, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you're listening, you are enjoying, please consider sharing this episode with someone else who you think would like it too. Enjoy the show. Well, let's get started. Can you give me and the audience a brief overview of exactly what it is that you do for a living?
Yes, so I am a doctor of acupuncture and herbal medicine, as well as a coach. So I do a lot of timeline therapy with people. So essentially, I help people live their lives the way they haven't been able to or have wanted to due to physical or emotional pain.
You said timeline therapy. Is that summation kind of what that is? Or could you maybe expand on that a little bit more? I've never heard that term.
Yeah, so it's a technique where you're working with the subconscious, and essentially you're working with times throughout your life, or sometimes if people believe in past lives or generational trauma or generational things that can be passed down, you're going back to these memories to work with them to release all of the stuck emotion there, basically process them, and then move forward without taking all of that old anger, sadness, whatever emotion is there with you.
When was it that you first decided that helping people with their wellness was something that you wanted to do?
It was when I started my own wellness journey. I was 21, and I had, 3 years prior, I was supposed to go to college to play basketball and decided that I was done. I'd had some surgeries, and after all the rehab, sometimes you're just over it. And so I moved on. I quit and went to a different school, and I wanted to be a veterinarian forever, and got into veterinary school and thought that acceptance was going to be like the light at the end of the tunnel, and it just wasn't. And I'd been a new student and a new learner of yoga and acupuncture as a client, and had seen great results, and was really taken with these Eastern philosophies, and didn't really understand why yet, and just realized that I had no passion in the veterinary field, which is something that hopefully everyone has in their career, is passion and love and joy, and it was just gone. So I decided, wow, I could actually combine these personal passions with a career, with monetizing it, and I switched gears and went to acupuncture school.
What was it specifically for you about the Eastern, healing practices, philosophies, ideas that was so appealing that maybe potentially worked that you weren't getting from the more Western side of things?
Great question. So Chinese medicine is a medicine based on philosophy, and the philosophy is Taoism. And it's very much about balance. It's very much about everything matters, and every symptom makes sense, and everything is connected. And it's something that I did not experience in Western medicine. Everything was very segmented, and it was very, how could your anxiety and your shoulder pain be connected? And how could digestive upset and worry or pain in your toe be connected? And it was so refreshing to be in a space where the body was looked at as a whole and not just parts. And that really invigorated me, and it helped make sense of my own health and wellness. And I was just hooked from that point forward.
Mm. That's something that's interesting to me, in that I notice a lot that there's so much debate, especially in like the fitness world. And, that's the world that I'm in professionally. So I guess I see this more, but sometimes I'm like talking about points with people about whether it's nutrition or fitness or whatever that works. And it seems like the common thing to do is to isolate a specific variable and then judge that specific variable, and then isolate the next variable and then judge that. And my whole thing is like, we can't do this. Like, you have to look at the thing as a whole. So it's kind of interesting that you worded in that way. And I guess this more Eastern medicine philosophy is something that I'm super unfamiliar with. This is new territory for me, but it's cool that you bring that up right away, that it's sort of a holistic, whole body, whole system approach right out of the gate.
Yeah. I mean, you can't get away from it in Chinese medicine. It's just, everything matters. We want to know a whole lot of information about what's going on in all body systems, because so much of it is truly connected.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess give me your thoughts on, I feel like we're moving that way. Like there's a merging between Western and Eastern ideas, both philosophically, medicine, etc.
Yeah.
I guess that I'm seeing from an outside point of view. Is that something that you think anything about?
Totally. I think, and just to preface, Western medicine has so much value, and I'm so grateful for it. I mean, there's so many reasons that people need to turn to surgery or certain specific rehabs, certain prescriptions. I mean, there's so much value there. What I think gets lost is the merging between the two and not having a balance. And I think we've seen the repercussions of that. And we've seen how Western medicine for a lot of people isn't working solely just with that approach, right? We need to have something else. We need to look at something from a different lens. And I think through that experience, especially with the healthcare system in this country, and seeing how much of it isn't working and what a mess some of it is, people are finally starting to say, oh my gosh, okay, maybe there's something to look at. And unfortunately, it takes people to not be feeling well for a long time, or it takes the system to almost be on the verge of collapse for some people to be like, okay, let's maybe look at other solutions. And I feel like we're getting to that sweet spot of things have not totally collapsed. And we have enough research now to see that maybe there is room for other approaches. In Western medicine is starting to refer more to all kinds of other healers that are still labeled as alternative medicine, acupuncturists, chiropractors, DOs. I mean, there's all of these professions that fall under this alternative or holistic care. And it's really exciting. And I hope that it becomes more approachable even with insurance companies. And I mean, there's a whole lot of other hoops that will be really nice to see us jump through. And I hope it happens, in our lifetime. But it's definitely better than it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I can't even remember what I was talking to. I interviewed a lady named Linda Hancock a long time ago, and I can't remember what she was talking about, but she used this analogy to compare something that I use all the time now. And she said a lot of things in life are like pairs of shoes, and that, like obviously most pairs of shoes probably won't fit your feet well, but you just kind of, and everybody has like these are the shoes that I wear sort of thing. And I feel like everything is like that, whether it's workout methodology, simple stuff, workout methodology, morning routine, habits, or something that's more higher level like medicine, whether it's this particular thing or this or that particular thing. I think some combination of anything, as long as it works, is what we should be like. That's the thing that frustrates me the most, I think, about this conversation, is that people potentially say people chalk up Eastern medicine to just like hokey woo woo type stuff. But it's like, it's worked for some people, at least anecdotally. And so why would you wish them to have not had that at their disposal?
I know, it's odd to me as well.
What is the why for you? Why do you, I feel like, I know you talked about like you started your own journey with this and you wanted to help people, but I feel like it takes a specific kind of person to want to take the things that worked for them and then make it like a career. Like I'm one of those people where I got in great shape in high school and I really fell in love with fitness. And then I was like, okay, I want to help people do this as well.
Yeah.
What is the why for you behind why you transitioned to wanting to help people yourself with this?
I want to share it. I mean, it would feel weird and selfish to not share, everything that I've experienced. And, for me, none of this is what I grew up with, right? It was very Western medicine. It was very, there was like one religion, there was one medicine. It was very there's one way, right? And when I realized through my own experiences that there are so many different ways and different ways that work better for certain people, it was such a mind-blowing experience. And it just really excites me to share this information, to share this approach, and to help a bunch of people, to feel the way that they haven't been or have never felt, and I just truly wake up every day excited to do what I do. And I wish that we all felt like that in our careers. And I just feel really lucky to be in that space where I found something that having to make money and passion got to meet.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think that it's kind of like you realize you were sort of standing on this pot of gold the whole time. Like, it's right here. We don't, everybody's sort of missed it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I'm curious about is, how would you define wellness?
So I define wellness by basically how imbalanced are you? And I look at the pillars of health. So financial, spiritual, mental, physical, social, relational, and talk about those. And I do this with my clients all the time. How are we doing here? How are we doing there? Because I think so much emphasis gets put on certain pillars in every culture, and every culture is going to be different, where the balance is. But wellness is about how good are you feeling, and in all of those different realms, all of those different pillars. And are you joyful? How in tune are you with your emotions? How are we feeling on a day-to-day basis? And I don't mean how much money is in your bank account. That's not the only thing that we're looking at, or how fast can you run your mile, or, these things that in this culture, people are like, oh, this matters. But how do you actually feel? And does it feel like you're taking a well-rounded approach to life?
Do you get a read with the people that you work with on, for example, I feel like it's pretty easy for me to identify when a certain area of my life is struggling. And I don't know if I have it necessarily defined as specifically as you in terms of those different set of pillars. Obviously, I have those things, but I don't know if I necessarily think about it in that context. But I know that if I'm feeling any semblance of disquiet or anxiety, I can usually easily identify where it's coming from. This is because I'm in a bad financial situation. This is because I've been slacking on my workouts. I've been eating like crap, whatever it is, right? Do you feel like people have a good, thermometer on that? They have a good instrument for reading what the problems are? Or do you feel like people really struggle with that? And that's sort of what you feel like your job is identifying and helping people identify what those reads are?
I would say 75% of the population is not good with that thermometer. And I don't really like that terminology, but room for improvement. You know what I mean? And a lot of people just have never been taught how to identify these things, right? Or they've been taught to put so much emphasis on one area, or it's just that no one said something to them in a certain way. So when we break it down and we're like, how are you actually feeling? Where's that in your body? What's going on? All these light bulbs click, because we all have this in us. We all have this capability to do that and to be really in tune and to really get beneath the emotions and beneath everything that's going on, exteriorly, to what's going on internally and why. But sometimes there's other things that are just so loud that we forget to listen, or we're not used to listening to that little voice. So that's a lot of what we do in sessions, is learning to listen to that voice and learning to identify what's really going on.
So my brain immediately goes to I feel like we could fix this problem literally in a generation. We have the opportunity, I think, to teach our children how to do a better job than we did. And I guess my question is geared towards that. How would you go about teaching? Obviously, I think you would probably also say that anybody can learn at any point, right? And I think that's an important thing to honor as well. Yeah. But I just, my brain goes to I want to be able to teach my kids and the young people that I have an influence on, how to emotionally regulate themselves, how to process the things that they're going through. Just give me your opinion on that.
So, okay, I have a great example for this. I had the opportunity this past year to work with the high school baseball team, and I loved it. So 14 to 18-year-old men, and I was not sure how I would feel in this role. And I was brought on to help with the mental aspect of the game of baseball. So basically just psycho-emotional coaching, emotional regulation. And one of the first times we met, I asked them about anger and frustration. How prevalent is that in your life? And of course, these are teenage men, That's very prevalent. It's very prevalent with all teenagers. You know, there's a lot of emotions going on. And they like didn't have much of an answer for me. So we talked about how to, like, when you're feeling an emotion, you know, what are you feeling? Oh, is it rage? Is it frustration? What's going on? What are the words? And then we had screaming practice, like literally taught them how to scream and to like emote this emotion. And of course, screaming is not socially appropriate in most settings, but we talked about if you're angry and you feel this, what do we do? Why don't you scream into a pillow? Like when you're alone in your house, or if you're in your truck, scream into your sweatshirt, or something that's helping you move this emotion. And then you identify it, and then you can do breath work. So I taught certain breath work patterns. Here's what to do when you're overwhelmed. You know, here's a great way to cool heat in the body, however that works. And then we went on to the next emotion. Okay, so when you feel sadness, where is that in your body? And the more that you ask people these questions, especially teenagers or children, they're so intuitive to these things. They just haven't been asked, a lot of them, right? But if you just say, where is this coming from and what's going on? Where is it held in your body? It's instant. It's like, oh, wait, I feel tightness in my chest. I'm anxious. You know, I feel pressure. Okay, cool. What does it feel good to do? Oh, well, when I stretch or take really deep breaths and focus on my chest, it helps lessen the feeling. Awesome. Like, listen to that. And it's the same with every single emotion. It's just in a different place in the body. And they already know the answer. It's just like us as the adults knowing how to ask the questions to teach and help them connect the dots of what they're already feeling.
That's very, very interesting. And maybe I'm just like misremembering my childhood, but I think that that's probably pretty common that I wasn't necessarily directly taught like shut down the negative emotion. Like my parents never said that directly to me. If I was angry, like stop doing that, you know, but I would definitely say, I don't know if I was ever told to like think about the negative thing. And I think that that's something that I do really often now. Like instead of, I don't know, that's just how everything works. It's like, if you want to get in shape, it's if you're like in horrible condition, you haven't worked out a day in your life, it's very unlikely that you have the will and desire to exercise, but you have to kind of lean into the very thing that you're fighting against. Negative emotion, at least in my experience, has always felt that way too, where if I'm anxious or angry, then instead of just ignoring it and and choosing to let it just fester, sort of leaning into it, obviously not like in a negative way, but almost looking at it from an outside perspective. Okay, what is it specifically? Where is it coming from? How can I fix it? And usually you can dissipate, for the most part, the things that you're experiencing and going through just by identifying what it is and where they're coming from.
Yeah. And it's, for me, a lot of it's looking at the emotions as our teachers too, right? Like you're angry. So there's a boundary that's been crossed. Either someone else crossed a boundary, you crossed one of your own boundaries, something's been crossed. You know, you're afraid. Okay, something's not right. You know, like there's something that's yelling to you that doesn't feel safe. So it's trying to show you don't feel safe. Is it important in that moment? Is it, what's the word? Is it always contextual appropriate? No. Like, you know what I mean? If you're working with a lot of fear, your body's reacting like there's a bear that's going to hop out, but you're really just in a classroom. No, like that doesn't, but there's something behind that. You know what I mean? And honoring that your body truly feels like something is unsafe. So when you start to look at these emotions as teachers, you're like, oh, what are you telling me? Instead of just being like, oh my God, like this is an emotion, bad, 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 you know, like whatever that unconscious thought pattern is, saying, oh, okay, you're teaching me something. What are you teaching me? And then just listening to that internal voice of whatever the emotion is. Even anxiety. Okay, you're anxious. Are you anxious or are you excited? Because they actually have a lot in common. And sometimes it's one or the other. But just starting to ask those questions of what are you wanting to teach me? Oh, I didn't prepare for this, so I feel anxious about my speech coming up. Of course, you're showing me where I can be better prepared next time. You know, thank you so much, body. Like you're not doing anything wrong. You're always doing something to try and help me. It's not always helpful in the moment, but it's always trying to help you. Your body never does anything that it thinks is going to hurt you. Even cancer cells truly are trying to help you. Everything your body does by design thinks it's helping you. So when you start to look at it and cultivate that relationship of, okay, what are you showing me and how can I help you because you're doing so much to help me? You start to merge that body and mind kind of complex and relationship.
Do you know who Dr. John Deloney is?
I don't think I do.
He wrote a book that recently came out, maybe about a year ago. I didn't read the book. I listened to all the podcasts that he did for it, so I'm pretty sure I understand the book. It was called My Anxious Life, and he is a therapist and a counselor. And anyways, a framework, and this is pretty much exactly what you just said, but this is maybe a little bit of a different language to use, that really changed my understanding of what emotion is he said, and he was specifically talking about anxiety, but it applies to all the other stuff that you and I have been talking about, is that these things are just smoke alarms in our bodies. And the common wisdom around this for however many years has been to rip the batteries out of the smoke alarm and then just keep going. But we are leaving the smoke unaddressed, and there's a fire, there's a source of the smoke. And instead of worrying so much about the alarm going off, we should be focused on why it's going off instead.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Where do you feel like, of those pillars that you mentioned earlier, where do you feel like people put too much of their emphasis in our current day and age?
I think financial and physical on overall have the most, or the too much, the most unbalanced emphasis. Of course, you can find, a population of clients that it's going to be a different one. But an example of this is I see a lot of people who put so much emphasis on their physical body, and their mental and their spiritual health is like ground zero. And that's why it's fascinating to me, because I do see such an overlap in all of these ways. But just because you're physically fit does not mean that you're emotionally taken care of, right? Or that your spirituality is completely together. And that's not great language, but I think that a lot of people look at someone, and when they see them physically fit, they're like, they've got it all together. That's like the first judgment, which is a very like positive judgment towards them. And that's not always true. Like, we cannot judge a book or a client by their cover. I also see it a lot with financial health. People who really, really emphasize the importance of finances at the expense of everything else. I see this a lot when I work with couples or people, and typically if it's a heterosexual relationship, typically it's a man who thinks that, holding the financial weight of the relationship outweighs all of the household work, all of the spirituality in a relationship, holding down like the physical stuff. And so this can be a really eye-opening experience to say, here's the pillars of health for an individual and for a partnership. And there's not one that's weighed more than the other. There's truly not. And if one partner wants to take on 100% of one of the things, and sometimes that's financial if only one partner is working, then these other pillars are just as important, and that needs to be recognized. Now, society really, really, really puts emphasis on financial and physical health. I mean, they are like, if you've got those things, everything's perfect. And I feel like recently you're starting to see this more infiltration of, no, but how's like the mental, how's the emotional, how's the relational health, which is really awesome. How's the spiritual health? And it's awesome to bring those more to light and to get more of like an integration of all of these pillars of health. But yeah, I think by far it is financial and physical.
Mm. I think the sooner that you realize that your body is a depreciating asset, the sooner you can overcome that. Like, I get that a lot where people, I'm 24 and I'm getting married in October, and like I seemingly have my life together, I think, from the outside. And I'll get that comment a lot, like, dude, you're in great shape. Like, you have all this stuff going for you. You got it all figured out. And I'm like in my head thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, obviously I think that I'm doing well in a lot of the other aspects too. But I think that something that has always made me pull back a second is that when people say that, I go like, you have no idea how I'm doing. Like, obviously if it's a close relationship, they might have a clue as to how I'm doing, but I don't know. It's just so important, I think, to realize that you can never tell by how somebody looks or even acts publicly how they're really doing internally. So it's awesome to hear you say that.
Yeah. First of all, congratulations on your upcoming wedding. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
That's really exciting. And yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most rewarding parts of my job is to truly like hone in on that every single time that I make a judgment, even a small one, about a client based on either an intake form or something. It's wrong. And it's so exciting because I love being wrong. And that's so cool that I mean, and this doesn't happen often, but as humans, it does. Like, you're going to find yourself making these little judgments, even when you're practiced in this, and it's part of your profession to not do that. Your brain's going to do it at some point, and then you're wrong. You're like, thank you so much, universe. Like, this is such an awesome reminder to not do that, and to always leave room for magic, and also for expression, and for being wrong, learning something new.
I feel like, so I hear you and I agree with you 100%. And I can't help but think about the, I guess, almost societal obstacles that are in our way. Like, some people literally cannot do anything but worry about their financial situation for right now. And so what would you say to people that are sort of in that boat where they feel like almost stuck, where if they were to focus on other things, the bills still have to be paid, the kids still have to eat, etc. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, this is a huge one. And I love talking about this, because truly, no matter what is happening in your life, and I really do mean that, no matter how many people are depending on you or what is going on in the financial state, you are going to have a plan or a track that works for you. So let's say that you are having a really hard time not worrying about finances because there is some serious bills coming up, right? That you really need to have this money done. Like, it's a big topic right now. So what I would say is, at the end of the day, when you come home, whenever your job is done, whether you have 4 hours of sleep or 6 or whatever it is, give yourself a moment, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. If you have to have children with you, have them with you. Sit down and just take a moment to breathe and to check out for even 2 minutes, and just to say, I have done everything I could do today for this, and tomorrow's a new day. And I'm just going to take a minute and have it to myself. Share it with your kids, again, if they have to be with you, which sometimes that's the case. And maybe you teach them breath work. Maybe you guys teach each other how to have 5 minutes of relaxation a day, so that you're having something that's getting you out of the financial mind frame into the spiritual or the mental, right? Or if you're journaling, if you sit down to color with your kids, maybe while they're coloring, you journal all of your thoughts down just to dump it out of your head. I mean, there are so many tools that are completely free that can fit into any single lifestyle. You just need to decide what works for you, and then commit to that 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you have in that day. And if sometimes that's what it is, that's what it is. And that's okay. It's not going to look the same as everyone else's.
So I'm going to try to tie 2 points together here, and I hope I don't mess this up. But it's interesting that you have this balance of this perspective of looking for an even balance. And it's, that's obviously very ingrained in a lot of Eastern cultures. I'm super into samurai culture and Japanese philosophy. I just read a ton of stuff about it. You know who Miyamoto Musashi is? Okay. Book of Five Rings, right? I'm reading the novel that's about him right now. But anyways, it's very interesting to me because I talk a lot about on the show the difference between goodness and greatness, and I feel like the American sports system has amplified what it means to be great, like sacrifice life and limb so that you can achieve excellence in sport, and it's an important thing to do, and it is a honorable thing to do, and if you can do it, you should do it. But I think one of the problems with striving to be great is that you oftentimes will sacrifice the wellness of other people that are around you for your own personal gain. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, but I think one of the qualities of goodness is at times you are almost sacrificing X achievement for yourself so that you can help others be and do well. And I think that one of the qualities of goodness is very in line with this idea of being balanced and shooting for balance, because of what it basically allows you. Being balanced allows you to operate from an amazing space in life where even when you are going through turmoil, you can basically, ride the wave of life, to be a little bit more cliche, right? And when I say that too, I think it's important to mention, it's usually not like an even keel thing. I think it's like, okay, this area is problematic, I'm going to focus on it. And then something else pops up. Okay, I've neglected this for a little while. I have to focus on this. And the reason why I bring this up is because I feel like that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we are up against, is there's almost an ingrained, I've talked about people a ton on the show. There's almost an ingrained idea that we should be doing well for ourselves in the West. And I just don't think that that's a ticket to a happy, fulfilled life. You have to ingrain yourself in communities, and you have to ingrain yourself in relationships, and you have to simultaneously help others to help yourself. And that is sort of the balance that it seems you and I have been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with all of that. I also think that, the goal in life is not to have the least amount of stuff on your plate, right? That the goal is to have the resilience so that when things are hard, and they're going to be hard, like you're going to have periods of life that are hard. Maybe you have a period of a lot of death around you, or maybe you lose a job, or you name it. Everyone's going to go through these periods. But if we're working on this balance when we're even not in those periods and all the way through it, instead of feeling like this, where the highs and lows are really extreme, it feels more like a soft wave, right? So you're expanding that resilience. Secondly, to your point of our cultural, I guess, priorities, yeah, we don't value, especially our elders in this culture, right? Which is a huge emphasis in a lot of Eastern cultures. And we're not valuing community or external anything. It's a very individualistic culture. And I think that comes at a really high cost, which is loneliness. And you do end up screwing a lot of people over to get to the top, which I'm going to put in quotes, because what does that even mean? It depends on your values. But in this country, a lot of that is money. The top, quote unquote, is how much money are you making? How much success do you have? And success in this culture is awards, and maybe how much time you're on the television, or someone wants to hear you speak, or whatever. We're not valuing the quote unquote top as, wow, how much balance do they have? How do they treat other people? What is our community like? Are they grounded and rooted in love and faithfulness and respect? That's not what we're valuing as the top in this culture. And it would be really awesome to see a better blend of that. And I do think in these younger generations that there's a better balance of that coming. But it's been, and I think still will be, a longer ride to get there.
Yeah, I think that is such a tricky conversation to have, because you and I as adults, it's pretty easy if somebody is like, do this thing. We're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't care about that. But I think especially for young people, it can be hard to, number one, like know the right thing to do. But number two, be willing to sacrifice the thing. For example, here's a good example. Like 13-year-old Bill, for example, no 13-year-old's named Bill anymore, but 13-year-old Bill has like a friend's birthday party that he really wants to go to, but he's playing like his youth soccer state championship that he's been working towards since he was like 5 years old, because we put kids in sports teams that early. And like his parents make him go to the sporting event and not his friend's birthday party, because he thought, like, even though he would rather do that, right? I think like that's a really good example of kind of the point that I'm drawing to here. It's really hard to do the right thing for kids, especially because, there's so many, they're not always the decision maker, and there's a lot of other outside things that can more easily influence them than, say, you and I.
Totally. And of course, there's the conversation too of, were your parents really emotionally intelligent? Did they treat you well? I mean, there's a layer of privilege there in that conversation too, of, do we respect all of our elders, or how do we navigate when everything didn't look really, really warm and fuzzy, and there was layers of abuse or layers of all kinds of things? So, I mean, there's many, many nuances to this conversation.
Let's start talking about best practices. I know this is like a very nuanced conversation because it just depends on the person's life, I'm sure. But I know we each, you have each one of these pillars, and I'm sure there are certain practices that you probably would like clients or people that you work with to have within each one. Again, this is probably circumstantial, but let's just go over what you find works best for people. And you can start anywhere that you want, but what are, in your view, best practices that people can get into if they're looking to improve their wellness?
Sure. By pillar. Okay, we'll go that way.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, by pillar.
Bipolar. Okay, so
I thought you said bipolar, and I was like, "What is?" And then I realized what you said. My brain rewound, and I was like, "Oh, she said bipolar." Yeah, bipolar.
Bipolar. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So, Yeah, let's go spiritual. So spiritual health, which this could be religion, this could be non-religion. You take it however this makes sense to you. Find whatever you believe in, higher power wise. Okay, is it universe? Is it God? Is it whatever? And once you have your idea of that, spend minimum of 5 minutes a day practicing that. Whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's, doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Whatever feels good to you, but actually commit 5 minutes a day at least of sitting in that space. I think the spiritual health is something that really comes online when things are not going well, you know, for people, and they really turn to that. So it's focusing on flexing that muscle when things are going well, and maybe in the interim when things are like, they're all right, I'm going towards these goals, or, you know, we're just kind of coming out of a period of things being hard, but 5 minutes a day, just focusing on that. And then I would say for emotional.
Can I add to the spiritual for a sec?
Yeah, please.
I'm assuming this is probably going to be relevant to every single point that you have, but what's important to me, I think that you mentioned, is like the need to do the work, and none of the stuff that we're probably going to talk about can be done unless you like actually do the thing. And like thinking about the thing isn't doing it, and planning to do the thing isn't doing it, and getting ready to do it isn't doing it, but doing it is doing it. And to give a personal anecdote for this, I don't have a spiritual bone in my body. Like I have a very hard time with this, and I've looked and looked and looked and looked, and I just like can't ever settle on something that seems right to me, because I have a very Socratic way of thinking where I'm just like, the only thing I know is I know nothing. And I always come back to that. And I, through, you know, years of exploring this, stumbled upon, I think it's Carl Jung's idea, but he just basically has a fake it till you make it philosophy. And that's what I do. I just kind of pretend. And over time, when you do that, you start to actually see, you know, spiritual intervention in your life, and whether it actually is happening or not. But the fact that you're identifying it is important. And so the reason I bring that up is because it took me years and years. Obviously I'm still young, and I'm sure this will probably change again, but like of just working with it over time and not giving up on the fact that I just didn't go up. I'm just not a spiritual person and forget about it. Like I wanted to do it. I knew it was important, and I'm in a pretty good place with it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to talk about the 3 different energies of thinking, doing, and being, you know, and we all know those people who are like, oh yeah, like I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. And then they spend a lot of time talking about it, but they're still not doing it. Right. So
that's what I do.
Thinking to talking to talking, and you're like, okay. So when are you doing it? Like, what's the plan? And then doing, like, the 3 different energies, and they're all great. And when you go from one phase to the next, like that's a huge celebration, thinking to speaking to doing. So I just want to applaud anyone who gets from one phase to the other, because it's a big deal. Emotional, again, free resource, which is what I'm going to focus on here. Of course, there's an option to work with a professional for any of these pillars of health if you feel like you need it. But free resources is spend some time with yourself. And I want you to literally write down, like, what are the emotions that you experience? Anger, sadness, fear, guilt, shame, hurt. What is it? You know, what are those? And how often do you feel those? Happiness, write down happiness, like write down the positive ones too. Happiness, joy, elation, excitement. And when you write them down, notice how they feel in your body. And it might be really triggering to write down the happy emotions for some people and realize, oh, wait, I'm not spending a lot of time there, you know, or maybe it feels the opposite, and writing down the negative, quote unquote, emotions is really hard, because you realize, oh, wow, okay, I feel like this all the time. Like I always have sadness with me, or whatever it is, you know. And if that happens, I just want to congratulate you for noticing it, right? And being in tune with it, and then making a plan to help move that through your body. But a great resource, especially for anger, is writing letters and then burning them. Like if you have stuff on your mind, I mean, this could work with sadness or fear too. Write a letter to someone that you have unsaid words to, dead or alive. Write a letter to an organization, a memory, a anything. I mean, you could write it to a church. You could write it to a neighborhood. You could write it to an idea that ticks you off, and then burn it. And you have this like release of emotions through that process. No one's going to read it. You're not going to save it and read it later. I want you to burn it so that energetically it's moving on. And then, of course, if you want to emote anger or frustration further, screaming into a pillow is one of my very favorites, because you're actually letting it out of your body. Like, we can talk about anger and frustration all day, but until you do something to emote it, it's not really going anywhere. Like, not completely. You're still going to have some of this stuff in your body. So try it and see how it feels. And I would encourage you that if something that I'm saying feels really triggering, a pillar or a technique, there's probably something there for you to learn. If anything is not neutral, then there's something there for you to look at, right? So try it and see how you feel. Same with happiness. If you write down, you're like, wow, I want to feel more happiness in my life. What if you set a timer for 2 minutes and you just laughed as hard as you can? And you let it be really awkward and weird. And this is, Joel, this is your fake it till you make it. What would that feel like at the end of the 2 minutes, just practicing laughter? Or every morning, wake up and smile at yourself. Like, the first thing you do, this little moment of like, good morning, me, like, I love you. It takes 30 seconds. And it's just the first thing that you're doing, not looking at your phone, not rolling over, looking at your partner or your animal or whatever. You're just saying, oh, good morning, I love you. And I'm going to commit to this little piece of happiness, even if it's the only one throughout my whole day. And play with that with all the emotions. If it's sadness, allow yourself to cry. Set a timer for 30 minutes and just cry as hard as you can, just to let it out. Because these emotions are on you for a reason, and they're just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger until you give them space, because they're getting louder for a reason. They're wanting to be acknowledged. And we're not taught largely as children how to move through these emotions. So as an adult, we get to reparent ourselves in that way.
Just to add to that, I think that a lot of people will hear what you said about expressing, especially certain emotions, like smiling to yourself or like screaming into a pillow or laughing. Like, a lot of people can't even think about doing that because it's like awkward. And the only thing that I would say to that is like, how is anybody going to know? Just like try it. And if it works, then do it.
Yeah, you're alone and it is awkward. So if you're like, oh, that's so awkward, you're right. It is. And it's only going to be awkward until you give it a shot. But if you feel better at the end of the day, it was worth it.
Okay, next pillar. Where do we want to go?
Physical. Let's go physical. I would say find a movement that feels good to you, just so this is really approachable. So this could be CrossFit. This could be walking in the neighborhood. This could be riding a bike, slow yoga, chair yoga. Find something that feels good to your body now and commit to doing that 4 times a week. So 4 1-hour periods, especially if you're new. I think that the body wants more movement than that, but I think that's a really approachable. Where can you find 4 hours a week to do something, to do movement? Or could you do it 6 days a week for 30 minutes? You know, what can you do? And especially if you're new to this, I want you to take a mental tab or write down, if you're a visual person, how do you feel before and after movement? Because it's easy to, in a time of stress or in a time when things get difficult, to drop things when you're not thinking about how you're feeling before and after, right? How it's helping you move through your emotions, yada, yada, yada. So keeping it simple, pick something you like and do it 4 times a week.
If I could just add to that, I feel like I can add to this because I do it professionally. I think that people get really bogged down about what it is that they need to do for workouts, and they set the bar extremely high, but the bar is extremely, extremely, extremely low. And I mean, research even backs this up. Like, especially people who listen to podcasts. I feel like people who listen to podcasts are like already ultra mega fit people, and they want to like know exactly what the protocol is for maximum hypertrophy gains and things like that, and like maximum zone 2 time during the week. But like 80% of the benefit you're going to get from exercise comes from pretty much the bare minimum, as you were describing, like 20 to 30 minutes of walking or light cardio a week, 1 to 2 strength training sessions a week. And I always just tell people, like, this is where all the internal work needs to come in. For example, my fiance, she hates exercising, but she exercises like 5 or 6 days a week. And we have a nice home gym, and she just does her thing. And I've programmed on and off for her over the years. Like, I'm not currently doing it, but every once in a while she'll ask me for a workout or whatever. and she's done it long enough now that she can like stick to a routine. And the reason why she does it is because it's very low resistance. She just has to walk downstairs and get into the garage and exercise. And so like you do CrossFit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go CrossFit. Anyways, like we like CrossFit. We do CrossFit. If I didn't love to exercise and the CrossFit gym was 20 minutes from my house and there was an Orange Theory a mile from my house, I would probably just go to the Orange Theory. So like figure out what it is that you might find when you do exercise, you love it. You just didn't know. But if you just don't care about exercise, just recognize you have to do it at some level and do the path of least resistance, and then just do that. And then after years and years and years, you're going to be super mega fit.
Yeah. I had this client, she was 78 and she did yoga every day. And I asked her once, why do you love yoga? And she goes, why would you say that? And I said, you don't love yoga? Is that what you mean? And she goes, no, I don't love yoga. I honestly kind of hate it. But you know what I love is being 78 and being able to do a headstand. Like I love the way I feel doing it. And I was like, that is a wonderful point. Thank you for saying that. And so if you're out there and you're like, I don't love this, I don't want to show up 4 times a week. Sometimes it's not about love. It's just about knowing what's good for you and finding a way to just find the little joy in it. Maybe you like being in your garage because you can stare at your dog while you lift weights. Cool. Maybe you can look out the window and see a pretty flower. Awesome.
And on that note too, that reminded me, I'm sure that this client maybe started yoga a while ago, but it's never too late to start. Like she's 78 doing headstands. That's awesome. That's so awesome. And there's actually a story that I read recently about, I think he was 96. He was from the UK, I believe. And he had a VO2 max of a 40-year-old. And he got into rowing. He went to a rowing club when he was 60 something. And then he just did it pretty much every single day. And by the time he was 90, he had this insane, oxygen capacity. And I think that's just a testament to like, it's never too late to start. And if you feel like you've gone even your whole life without doing anything, you can still step foot in the gym and reap amazing benefits from it.
Truly. Good point.
Okay. What's next? Okay.
Let's do relational. So easy check-in with this is truly, how do I feel about the relationships in my life? Am I as close as I want to be to people? Do I feel supported? Am I giving support? And step 1 is like total accountability of what is happening and in the situation that you have created. Yeah. And thinking about when's the last time you checked in on your friends? How often would you like to be seeing them? What's going on? And then finding those places where things don't feel good and making strategies, and then honoring the places where it does feel good. Friendships, family, and whatever that means to you, blood or not blood family, and partner or partners. And just start noticing the areas that feel lacking, and whatever feels lacking, go and give that. So it's that real old school knowledge of, if you want to receive it, you have to give it, right? So, you feel like you haven't been checked in on enough lately, go check in with your people. Ask them to go for a coffee, ask them to do something, and understanding that it might feel really awkward at first, but if you're wanting to build these relationships, you have to actually build them, right? You have to communicate. And I feel like with relational, it can be one of the most intimidating pillars to work on. And a lot of people do turn towards some sort of professional just to help work through some of the beliefs behind it. So if that feels like you, that's totally okay. And if you're like, no, actually, this was a good reset and I'm just going to go out there and start having conversations with my people and with new people, awesome, do that. But I would definitely just take a little inventory scan of, okay, where do my relationships feel good and where is there room to grow, and what feels like an easy approachable way to start to mend the gap there.
This one's so hard for me. Like I'm severely introverted, severely. Like I just don't care to be around people at all. I'm pretty good about talking with people and communicating, but it's just like so draining for me to be around people. But I know still it's good for me. And I've really learned that, I think, over the last 2 years, is that anytime, like my fiance and I were in a book club, and there's two other couples, and then they all have a couple kids. And every time we like do one of those hangouts, which is every like 3 months, I'm like super refreshed and like, wow, we should do this more. But it's just so hard for me to convince myself, like, get out the door and actually go invest in the relationships that you have with people. But again, this touches, I think, a little bit on the individual versus collective ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to be moving more towards the collective, and we need to be doing things for the group. And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to change the world. Like, find a group of friends that are in your community and like do something together and just invest some time and energy into it, and your life will be better.
Yeah. And I think, I just had this thought pop into my head when we talk about like relationships, or some people will ask, how many friends should I have? Or they'll ask this from another pillar: how many hours a week should I be working? Or how much money should I have in my bank account? Take any of those questions, right? I don't care what the answer to that is. What I care about is that it feels good to you. So some people can go out there, and let's use work hours because that's an easy one, can go out there and work 55 hours a week, but their nervous system is so calm and so in check, and they are very dedicated to mindfulness, meditation, spiritual practice that allows them to work that hard. Awesome. And they truly, they're healthy. Like I do all my intake, look at their tongue, take their pulses, and things are good. Awesome. There are some people out there that working 40 hours is like max, max, max. It's a stretch, it's a push, and they should probably pull back because something else isn't working. Some people can have 20 best friends and they feel awesome. They feel lit up. It is amazing. Some have one or two or three like closest friends, and that feels really good. So because all of these pillars are so subjective, I just want to remind you guys to always, always, always tune into yourself and to tune into what feels good to you, because someone else's experience isn't yours. And whatever it is, you just need to feel really good about it.
Awesome. What's next? We've done spiritual, emotional, relational, and physical.
Financial. This is a good one. So this one's broad, and some people who know very little about like personal finances, I would recommend, there's some really good book recommendations, but one of them is going to be Profit First. If you want to learn how, especially if you're in a business, how to like structure business finances, or your own savings account. Like, how much should I have that makes sense to like having savings for a rainy day, or how much of like a little nest egg do I need to have? Some people say it's 3 months worth of your all of your expenses minimum. Some people say 6 months. So I think the first step in this pillar is to start learning about different theories. So read a couple of finance books, look at your relationship to money. How do you prioritize it? Is money held above all of the other pillars, or is it held below all the other pillars? Do you even know what's going on in your bank account? Like, how is your relationship with that app on your phone? Do you even have the app on the phone? Like, what is going on here? And just starting to take inventory. And if the answer to all those questions is no, I don't know any of these, the answers to these questions, I'm avoiding it, I'm in total avoidance. Okay, so once a day, look at the app. Just start looking at your finances. Just start having this relationship and saying, hey, hi, like, nice to see you. And then starting to cultivate this relationship with finances and to see it as an energy. And this is a big one, but when I started doing this, everything changed for me, because it truly just is energy.
I'll add, just hire a financial advisor. We started working with one recently, and it's like a free coach. Like, you're making me way more money and it's paying for you. And so I've learned so much just from like 2 or 3 introductory conversations with a financial advisor, both for myself. Like, if we stopped working with this person, then we would be infinitely better off. But like, I don't know. I'm somebody who, I'm sort of into finances and I'm pretty financially literate, but I just like don't care to invest a lot of time. And so it's just easier. We're fortunate, obviously, that we can do that. But I think more people, it's more accessible than people realize to have a financial advisor, and you should just do that.
Yeah, I think you really should. And I will say that financial and relational are, I think, the top 2 pillars that people see or seek help or assistance in first, which is awesome, because those are huge and they're not the most widely talked about in society.
I also feel like, just from an outside perspective, it's because it's like the individual versus collective thing. Have you given any thought to that? It's like relational and financial are outside of yourself. And so that, like, people struggle with that for a reason, it seems.
Yeah, everything's a metaphor, all of it.
Yeah. Is mental one of the pillars that you look at too?
Yes, it is. So some people see mental, emotional, and spiritual as different, and some people kind of loop them together, whereas I see the spiritual as outside of yourself. It's your relationship with the beyond, the divine, however you see that, God, religion, etc. And I see emotional as those tangible emotions, anger, sadness, fear, like what you can name. And I see mental more as like nervous system state, if that makes any sense, if kind of putting these aside, all of those. So your resilience to things, how kind of like in that analogy of like people working 40 or 55 hours a week and how they're feeling. So do you feel drained by everything that you're doing, right? Like being drained or tired isn't an emotion. That's like a state of being. And that's how I see more than mental. It's like the state of existence that you're in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that I think most people would be able to separate those things. I think that mental is like the smart third party that like kind of views what's happening to your body and mind, right? Like you can observe the emotions with your mind. And even like at an even more fundamental level, like reading and learning is a mental practice as opposed to like doing some sort of breath work to regulate emotions or release emotions like you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And with mental, my biggest check into that is seriously, how do you feel at the end of the day? How did you navigate everything that was going on? Did you have a lot of like highs and lows? Did you have moments where you were really holding your breath and then your body felt like you were in like a fear response or like an anxiety response? How did you just navigate everything? How did you bring in all the information that happened to you during the day? What is your nervous system like? And it's pretty amazing to go through your day, and maybe you take one day, you live it normally, and then you're like, wow, I feel really drained. I feel like my head was really spinning and I was really not in my body. It was like in my head the whole day. Take the next day and have all your emphasis being on being in your body, being present, taking it moment by moment, and allowing your nervous system all of the time in the world to like adjust to what's going on. Of course, this is trauma aside. This is like a normal day in your life. And notice how those 2 days feel different. And for me, the mental health or the mental pillar is really about being present in your body and taking things moment by moment instead of allowing like the rat race to take you away.
Something that I struggle with as a trainer, as a coach, is I often feel like some of the work that I do is futile because like I have this weird belief that I feel like the people that are going to get in, because I help people specifically with their fitness, and obviously wellness revolves into that. And I'm sure help people in other areas too. But like when say people come to me, like the people who come to me and I help them get in better shape are the kinds of people that whether I was there or not, were going to get in better shape. Like they were going to find somebody, or they were going to learn enough, or they were going to, eventually get to the point where they had the right ingredients to where they finally got it together. And sometimes I feel like the people who, aren't quite ready for it yet, or like start and stop and do this yo-yo thing, not necessarily that they're trapped. Obviously, like there's still hope for those people, but I guess they're just a little bit earlier on in that sort of coming to journey. And I'm curious if in your work, you have done any sort of emphasis on how to help people be a little bit more consistent with the kinds of things that they're doing. Because I would say that's probably where I would lose the most people in terms of being able to help them, is somebody just wasn't able to achieve the level of consistency that would have gotten them the thing. And then after doing that for long enough, they eventually give up on this method or this way.
That's a good question. So a couple of things come to mind with that answer. And first of all, when I first see a client, they'll come to me with some sort of health issue, right? That's why they're here. And what I'll do is I'll give them, here's like plan A. I would love to see you once a week for 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Here is what I would do if you can do this. Now, and then I'll ask, what comes up for you around that? Is there a financial strain? Is there a time strain? What does that work for you? And if not, like, let's ask the why. And if they honestly come to me and they say, you know what, I'm on a fixed income, I can come here like once a month for a while, is that enough? We'll genuinely talk about that. And I'll say, if that's what you can do, it's going to be enough. Like, we'll make that work. It's going to take a little bit longer, but of course, I give you homework to have at home. Here's what's going on. Now, if the conversation is different and the resources aren't in question, it's just more of a like, oh, well, like I could do that. And it feels kind of flaky. And I'm like, okay, what is coming up for you? Well, I just don't know if I can do that. Okay, why? Well, I just like have a lot going on. Okay, so what would you like to do? And they don't know. And I say, is this an issue in prioritizing yourself? And sometimes they're just like stopped in their tracks. And I'm like, are you not prioritizing yourself again? Like, is that what's happening here? Do you not feel like you're worth this? Do you want to wait and come back when things are no longer like a short 6-week fix, and instead now you have like a chronic thing going on because you're not willing to prioritize yourself and you don't have these skills yet? And then you can open those conversations and really understand what's going on, because if it's just, I don't have the resources, then we'll make once a month work and we'll do the best we can in between. But if this is a limiting belief and you just don't know how to prioritize yourself, then let's work on that. And I feel like in fitness and what you're talking about, that happens a lot too. It's just everything else is getting prioritized above it. It's relearning of, no, you need to have some you time. And if you don't do it now, like, you're not going to do it ever. Like, there has to be a time, when you start it. And of course, again, case by case, but asking those questions of like, why are you doing this? What's going on? Where's the emotion around this? Then you understand like what's going on in the client's brain. You can find a schedule of consistency that works for them, whether that's weekly, whether that's bi-weekly, or whatever it is that you like can both agree on. So I think consistency, especially in my world with my clients, is different. Like it's not usually going to be twice a week, but it's going to be a different schedule of consistency.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I think the challenge, you're right. There's an underlying belief. It's like, I actually had a conversation with a lady the other day who was like, she came in and she sort of set like really tight parameters on, she's working like 12 to 14-hour days. And I was like, yeah, she's got a family. Like, I don't think you can get in the gym. Like, and I basically presented like I will just meet virtually once a week and we'll talk about your program. And then like, you can do it on your own. And she was like, yeah, but I don't really want to work out at home. And it's kind of like, okay, well, something's got to give here. Like either, you're going to maintain the schedule and you're not going to come into the gym and you're going to have to like do something on your own, or you could come into the gym. And I think that this obviously touches on a lot of the stuff that we've addressed so far. It's hard. It's really hard. And, to do one thing, it's to say no to another thing. And I think people just need to over time come to the realization that you can make it all work. It's hard to make it all work, but it's worth it to make it all work. And you can fit things in and over time sort of address your own personal situation and schedule to fit all of these fundamental pillars of wellness that we've talked about thus far.
Did you say that to her?
Sort of. I mean, sort of. Yeah. I'm not very brave about saying, I usually tell people like, hey, this is like your first coaching moment. And then I'll like say something like that. But yeah, I mean, I usually am pretty on. I hate doing sales. Like I do our sales at the gym and I hate it. And usually I just like, I mean, this is how you sell, I guess, but like, I'll just tell people what I think. I'm like, you could do this, or you could do this, or if not, sorry.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that like the directness and I don't care, like truly, I don't care what people decide to do. Like it's what works for you. I mean, I do care. I want you to feel good, but this doesn't like, I think that some people are afraid that like their decision is going to like affect your life as a practitioner. And I'm like, no, if you don't want to be here, then just go. And I've actually had clients that I've said that to because they've had so much resistance. And I've straight up said, if you don't want to be here, there's the door. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't want you to be here unless you want to work together and on yourself and find a plan that works for you. So if this doesn't work, like, please, like, no hard feelings. I'll see you when it feels right. Like, let's go. But that like directness of, wow, okay, Isabel really doesn't care what I choose. Like, she's not going to sit here and beg for me to prioritize myself. Flip something. And they're like, you're okay. Yeah. Like it's time for me to commit to something, which is me, which is really cool to see when they make that decision.
Yeah. It's to touch on have you read that book Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa? It's like the 1,000-page epic on Miyamoto Musashi's life.
No.
You should totally check it out. It's called Musashi. It's quite a long read, but it's good. And I'm about halfway through and it's already kind of one of my favorite books. And I actually think it's extremely impactful. And I promise I'm going to tie this into what you just said, because I noticed right away how like Musashi's character speaks to himself. And he starts out as this sort of like young, rambunctious punk teenage samurai kid. And then like turns himself into this ultimate disciplined, loving, caring warrior. He's like super well balanced, like in line with a lot of the stuff we've talked about. And the way that he talks to himself is just so, it's like changed how I speak to myself, because he's very stern and hard on himself, but it's with like it's not, I don't even want to use the term grace because that's like a cliche thing to say now. It's with like, there's no judgment. It's like, I did this thing and I shouldn't have done that. I won't make this mistake anymore. And then he like moves on to something else. And there's no like no hard feelings, man. Like you're going to be fine. And I think that too often people, to describe what you were just saying, like if somebody comes into me and wants to sign up for the gym and then ultimately they're like, I don't really know about this. They're like so anxious about it. Like, it's really okay. Like you don't have to sign up here. You can go to a different gym or you can like walk on your own. Like it's okay. And I think that underlying sense of just like anxiety and fear is probably what is rooting all of the issues for this person getting started and actually like making actionable change.
Totally. That's a really good point.
Okay. I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff for hours. We didn't even get into the trauma stuff. Maybe we should do another one sometime where we can talk about trauma. But I do want to ask you this one question. I used to ask everybody, and I've kind of not been doing that, but you're a great person to ask. I'm curious to you, what does it mean for you to be a good person?
For me, being a good person is someone who knows when to put themselves first and when to put others first, and to be constantly playing with that balance and making sure that needs are taken care of, whether it's your own needs or noticing someone in your family, community who needs something, and to really just be focused on being of service to both of those parties.
Awesome. I think a common theme that we've talked about a lot is noticing, just like pay attention. If you take anything from this conversation, I think pay attention to yourself, pay attention to the people around you, pay attention to your community, and address the things that need addressing as they pop up. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was awesome. Plug your stuff. Where can people find, more from the stuff that you put out and things like that?
So my business is Admiring You Wellness. I'm Dr. Meijering. So website is www.admiringyouwellness.com, and Instagram, same thing, Admiring You Wellness.
Awesome. I'll be sure to obviously add that in the description for anybody interested in checking it out.
Thank you so much, Joel.
You're very welcome. We'll leave it right there. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you head on down to the description below to check out all of the resources that Dr. Isabel provided. If you guys are watching on YouTube, before you head out, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. If while you're listening, you enjoyed, please consider sharing this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.